Hello and welcome to the National Road Safety Partnership Program webinar, Job at Hand, Practical Ways to Stay Focused and Safe Behind the Wheel. My name is Jerome Carslake. I'll just move myself forward. There I am. So that's myself there in case you haven't seen me in the image here. If I'm the director of the program and it's many activities. And to find out more, please check out the NRSPP website, register for our newsletter, or follow us on social media such as our LinkedIn page. This webinar is going for around 20 minutes, and actually there won't be a PDF for this one.
No, there won't be.
So, because we're going to do this more of a Q&A, I guess, a bit more of a conversation as we're going through it all. So, we want to add in as many questions, thoughts, chats as you go through. But we thought, look, rather than just talking to you guys with the PowerPoint, we can do this as a flying conversation, checking in. So, for those of you who are online, please feel free to add in questions into the question answer box there. There's also a chat function which is open to everyone. We are recording, as you can sort of tell, and it will be shared following this webinar to everyone with a link, and will be a resource on the NRSPP website. So yeah, we're going to make this as interactive as possible as we move along. So welcome, David.
Thank you, Jerome. Thank you very much.
We've had a great morning together, catching up and discussing around it all. But look, I'll just do a quick little brief introduction for you, and then you may want to add something else as well.
Sure.
David's worked in advertising for 35 years, so I gather that would have been high pressure and evolved a lot over
Fairly
time.
so, yeah.
All while suffering the roller coaster like mental illness known as bipolar 1. And now you're a keynote speaker with Black Dog Institute, having spoken at many different organisations ranging from the Law Society to Linfox to Treasury, Family and Friends, all sorts of. I look at the list here and so of the who's who in organisations to reach out, which is fantastic. And I'm very privileged to have you joining me here today.
Not at all.
Anything I missed?
I don't think so. I think the reason I'm here and that it's relevant is because of my illness, bipolar 1. But that actually took me off into a whole different career from advertising and into mental health. But I think you pretty well covered it.
Fantastic. Well, tell me, you probably had a very busy month this month because it's Are You OK month. What does it mean so much to you, and how does it fit into your background?
Well, I find I'm with Are You OK month, I love it because I'm very, very busy. But the only thing I have that I'd say is a bit of a negative about it is it concerns me when companies, and this is certainly not true of all companies, but for some companies, Are You OK Day, Mental Health Month, they become the tick box items with which we go, well, we've done that for the year. Let's move on to other issues. It is fantastic. I mean, from a point of view, I've been busy. I will be all throughout October because of Mental Health Month. And it's great to be building awareness like that. But I think also the other side of awareness is that we're all very well aware of mental illnesses and mental health now. I think it's also finding the practical tips, the things that actually help people, as opposed to just enlighten them about there's this thing called mental health issues. So I think it's a bit of a two-way sword, the old Mental Health Months and Are You OK Days.
Well, and I must think one of the real interesting things about that, and this is where I think we're drawing in, we'll dive into this in a moment, you spend a lot of time around empowering others to check in with each other.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I have a mental health illness that I'll live with all my life because it's a genetic illness. And when I start talking with the Black Dog Institute, people say, oh, we'll tell you a story. But I don't actually think there's a great deal of power to be had in simply telling my story, because that might be interesting for some people. I think what's of interest and importance is what I've learned along the way. And I think if I can leave people with a thought that it's not mysticism, it's not smoke and mirrors, there's nothing scary about being able to talk to one another about issues and feelings and mental health and that sort of thing, then I think I've done a great job. And I think people should be able to leave a talk or a training session and go, it's nowhere near as complicated as I thought. I don't need a degree, and I feel a bit more confident in being able to talk to a friend or a family or a colleague or whatever.
And Now, this is a really interesting point, because I guess one of the hard things in the NRSPP, our remit is the vehicles at workplace and organisations. One of the hardest things with workers on the road is they're out of sight, out of mind, and some of them may not even come into depots or have a chance to chat with each other. So it's quite isolating by nature.
Absolutely, and isolation. You talk about mental illness in any way. Isolation is a key factor. People tend to withdraw. People tend to not want to be particularly social, but just being by yourself all that time can be really, really difficult to deal with. Start getting negative thinking, problems that have happened or whatever. It can be really hard because you don't have other people to bounce around with, or even to take your mind off things.
Well, let's just share some with everyone. So some of you may be aware that NRSPP has been creating a whole lot of toolbox talks centered on the heavy vehicle sector at the moment. And I think our theme for this month was, Are You Okay to Drive, aligning with Are You Okay Month. And we thought, look, there's a great driver in this, which will feature. His name's Cuz, and got to sing out to Cube for being a supporting partner for this. So let's roll Cuz,
Yep.
And then let's chat about that.
You just sort of know if they're very quiet. Yeah, something's up there. All right, I'll catch him later on. I'll get him by himself, and then we'll just say, "You all right, mate? You want a cup of coffee? Let's have a cup of coffee. Come on." I'm not going, no. I said, "No, I'm pulling in for a cup of coffee. Let's go. I'm waiting for you. Even if he's half an hour behind me, I'll back right off. Wait till he gets in. I'll see you at the BP." Exactly that.
Thoughts?
I love this guy. I must say, well, Jerome shared this with me last week, and I honestly believe that Cuzzy could tour Australia just talking on how to have a conversation about somebody you're a bit concerned with. He even in that, whatever it was, 30 seconds or a minute or whatever, he does so many key things. He keeps it casual. He doesn't mention anything about, "Oh, I'm worried that you're depressed or that you're suffering from anxiety or you might have a mental illness," whatever. He just simply notices that a colleague doesn't seem to be quite themselves, which is a thing that anybody can do. He keeps it casual and not like, "Oh, we should meet up and have a serious talk," or anything like that. He goes, "I'm going to be at the BP.
Let's have a coffee.
Have a coffee." The other thing he does there too, he goes, so he's saying, it doesn't matter if I'm a half an hour ahead of you. I think for a truckie to be able to say that, where everything's about time and movement and keep rolling, for him to say that to a friend, to go, "Well, it doesn't matter if I'm a half an hour ahead of you, I'll wait for you." He's saying, "This is important. I want to talk to you. I've got time to give to you," which is an amazing thing to do for somebody else, to go, "Yeah, look, big deal. If I'm a half an hour behind schedule or an hour behind schedule, so be it. You're really important to me." And the other thing he does, he's very easygoing with it, but in a way, he's very nicely insistent about it. Yeah, no, mate, I'll be at the BP. I'll have a coffee. This is something the guys got going, "Oh, not today, whatever." I just love it. I think he's the sort of guy you go, "I'll pull into BP. I'm going to drive out of BP feeling a bit better about this." Yeah.
And is that what you usually see? Because you look like Cuz he's a transport driver, and he's very manly. Is this what you see in when you sort of go out and you track with these sort of guys?
I actually, we haven't talked about this before, but I honestly do believe this. Talk to miners. I do a lot of talking and training with truck drivers and stuff. I believe there's more emotional intelligence in miners, truck drivers, people like that, than there is in like hugely paid partners of law firms, for example. And that's not to disparage those people, but I think because miners, truckies, we all work as teams. And so there's a natural more affinity of working together and caring more for each other. Whereas people that work in those large partnerships of a large accounting firm or a law firm or whatever, it's all about me. I get ahead by getting ahead of you, not by working with you. I get ahead by getting you. Whereas in this context, Cuzzy's because he's going, well, hang on, I've got nothing to win or lose. I'm taking care of a mate here. And I'll be there for it. And I honestly do. I think, and they've got, I think, got more ability to talk openly with less embarrassment than a lot of other people that you think, well, they should be able to have the nous to do this, and absolutely can't.
So back to the point you made earlier around, I guess one of the things is it's Are You OK month, and we're checking on those sort of things. How do you make it a bit more into the norm, do you think? Because I guess there's a comment you're making earlier. If the fish are all sick in the fish pond, is it about the fish, or is it around fixing the environment around those people, giving support? Because I think one of the things I'm seeing is massive changes happening in the transport sector and other organisations is they're beginning to think about how can we help our people.
Yeah, I think in this, just like you're saying about the fish, but this thought of how do we make trucking safer? How do we make it mental health safer? You know, for people, it's very unfair if the whole load's thrown on to the driver. That seems to me really ridiculous. And now this is not to say, I know there's a lot of big companies doing a lot of great work and really interested in this. But if you can't have companies working in synergy with their drivers and like allowing flexible, more flexible driving time when there's a, sort of allowing things to happen on the road or whatever, it becomes very difficult for a driver, no matter how much they might try to keep themselves mentally healthy, fit, or whatever it be, but when they're fighting elements that are beyond their control. And it's the same for any of us in any line of employment. If there's things that are beyond your control, it's hugely frustrating, especially if the person above you is going, won't allow for that and go, well, it doesn't matter, I don't care. This has got to be done by then.
So it's really going through that change. And we have spoken around transport drivers. There's other sectors as well where there's workers on the road. Like if you think about care providers, like very altruistic quite often, they're pushing them, and their focus is always on giving service, helping out, supporting other people, salespeople.
Yeah.
On the road, 6 to 8 calls a day. They have to make those. The targets are measured by them. They need to get out and make sales. But the thing is, each commonality with each of these people is in between those periods, they make in and out of the vehicles. They're also in the car quite often.
Absolutely.
So what does that mean for someone?
Well, I actually think somebody being in any vehicle by themselves is bound. For example, many of us have negative thoughts. Everybody, I think the only person on this planet that doesn't have a negative thought would be Donald Trump. But the rest of us, we have negative thinking. When you're by yourself, it's easy to start ruminating on those things. It's easy to go, oh, I missed this, or I should have done that, or there's a domestic thing that I should have attended to that I haven't. And it's easy for those thoughts to just start like a tumble dryer, just going round and round and round. And it becomes difficult because you've got nothing else to take your mind off it except the road and yourself. And it's very easy to fall into those patterns of negative thinking and not be able to stop yourself, or not even realize really that you're doing it, because we tend to do those sort of things by rote. We just fall into it and suddenly we're going, and our mind's doing, you were talking about before, like the devil and the,
exactly.
Yeah, and you're going a devil and angel on one side. And
so for those we're just talking about, referencing the show's age, back to the Looney Tunes and those sort of things, when you see the cartoons and you've got the good angel and the bad and the devil on one side, and quite often they're always going through and listening to the devil, and it's like that, the clickbait in modern terms, we're saying we find things in negative that we click on. So our mind does that as well.
I think our mind nowadays is, without getting too psychological on it, because I'm not a psychologist, but our minds tend to be drawn to negative things. If you look at nightly news, it's negativity, 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 and we fall for that. And I think our minds, we've almost been trained to go with the negative. And it's very rare, any sort of thought to go, I'll put the positive spin on that. I'll actually be objective about that, because our minds often, in fact, can often be terrible liars to us, telling us things that aren't right, telling us, basic thing, but like, I'm too fat, too thin, too stupid, too dumb. Why would I ever ask that person out? They would never go out with me. And we tell all this stuff to us. Our minds tell us that. And we never stop to be objective and sit back and go, well, maybe I want to ask that person out or whatever. Oh, we get on well, we have a laugh. Maybe she doesn't care the fact that I'm short and dumpy or whatever. That's just an example. But to be objective about that and go, well, we seem to get on well when we're together and we have a laugh, and maybe she would go out with me. And it's the same for anything, and especially when it comes to decisions. But we allow ourselves to run with these negative thoughts, as opposed to saying, let me just stop there. Let me really think about this. Let me be objective about that and go, does that really stand up? Or am I just telling myself that when it's not actually reality at all? And I'm actually a lot better than this, and I'm a lot better than that. Or will I just accept what my mind keeps telling me?
So how do you pull yourself back? You mentioned, because I know you're a mental health first aid trainer as well. Let's talk us a little bit. How do you reposition or reset?
Okay. I was taught a really good thing. If you start having lots and lots of negative thoughts and they just keep spinning, a psychologist once taught me this, said, imagine there was a great job going in with the company that you work for. And at first you go, that sounds fantastic. It's 50 grand more than I'm earning. They only want me to work 3 days a week. Sounds fantastic. And 5 seconds later, your mind goes, you must be kidding yourself. You don't have the ability for that. You haven't been at this company long enough. There's 6 other people going for this job. Why would you fool yourself? And you say to yourself, you're right, mind. Thank you very much. I won't make an idiot of myself. But this person said to me, imagine if that was a person coming up to you and saying those things. So in other words, there's a job going at the company, but you walk up to me and go, Dave, why would you go for it? You haven't been here as long. You haven't got the experience. You know, there's 6 other people going for it. They're all fantastic. Now, I may not completely disagree with you, but I'd be a lot more objective about it. I go, well, Jerome, yes, there's other people going for it. And I know, but when I was in this previous job, I used to do this and that. And perhaps that's sort of experience maybe of interest to whoever's interviewing me. And after all, if there's 6 other people going for it, there's already going to be 5 people that don't get it. What's wrong with 6 people not getting it? And guess what? I might just get it.
So you'll be in it to win it.
Yeah. And so I am going to be, if I think like that, I will be more objective. And I thought it was great. If you imagine somebody coming up to you and going, why you? You're immediately objective. And yet when it's just your mind telling you, you go, thank you. You're quite right. When you're not right at all.
So in the vehicle, and it's interesting because we'll be coming up soon to October, November. We're leading towards the holiday period.
Yep.
And there's usually a spike in when people make instances of they're rushing to try and get things done before Christmas, and they're pushing the limits, and they're a bit more sensitive and emotional. How do we continue beyond the September Are You Okay month and checking in with each other, balancing it out?
Okay. I think one big thing I think about in terms of mental health, mental illness, depression, anxiety, is not to think about mental health, mental illness, depression, anxiety. I think if we keep an eye on each other, whether that be colleagues, family, friends, but we keep an eye on each other in terms of Jerome doesn't seem to be himself at the moment. Exactly like Cuzzy did. He's noticed this mate, this truck. He hasn't gone, pretty sure that's a case of clinical depression that guy's got. He's gone, my mate is not himself at the moment. Now, Cuzzy didn't need to be told, well, it's February or it's June or it's Are You Okay month. He just naturally did that. So I think if we can begin to go, well, I'm not having to diagnose somebody. I don't have to be some sort of pseudo psychologist. I'm just being myself. But I notice my mate or my brother-in-law or whoever doesn't seem to be themselves. And I'm going to have a chat with them. And I'm not going to chat to them about, I'm worried about your mental health. I'm just going to chat and say, Jerome, you don't seem to be yourself at the moment. I don't know, you seemed a bit tired lately. You seem a bit down. And I'll leave that at that and let Jerome come in to a conversation. If Jerome doesn't want to talk, that's fine. He knows I've opened a little door if there is a problem. And Jerome can come back to me. Or alternatively, Jerome might say, well, actually, I have been feeling a bit down or whatever. In which case, I don't have to fix Jerome. I just have to be there to support him. And hopefully, if there is a problem, guide him towards some help. That's Cuzzy is doing that. I'm pretty sure he does that year round with all of his. And so I think if you remove this element of going, oh God, I got to talk about mental health, and just go, somebody doesn't seem to be themselves at the moment for whatever reason. Maybe they've split with their partner. Maybe it's not a mental health issue. Maybe they're finding it hard to make ends meet or whatever. Perhaps it is depression or whatever. But making it like that and making it a very casual conversation is something we can all do year round.
So when people are on the road, like, and this is a hard thing, you can come in, you can bowl through stuff and seeing snapshots of people, and the manager may not see them quite as much.
Yeah.
Well, how does that, are there any tricks or things we need to think about for those sort of workers?
I think it's keeping in touch with one another. And I'm not quite sure how it actually works for guys, especially long haul guys that are doing interstate stuff. But I think people can even tell from phone calls whether somebody's themselves, whether they're as talkative as normal, whether they're responding as well. So it's probably harder. Yes, it's harder when you're not seeing people all that often. But often these things you can just pick even from behaviours as to what they do, whether they're suddenly taking longer to do things. There's a whole bunch of other subtle things that can alert you beyond just seeing somebody face to face week in and week out. But I said, like, you should have Cuzzy sitting here instead of me. But Cuzzy, he knows that guy. I bet he doesn't see him every day. He's on the road, the other guy's on the road, but he probably talks to him. He's just noticed the guy seems down, says that. I think we can all sense in other people when they may be masking things or things are just not quite as good as they normally are. But if I was, what I would say is obviously you would try and stay as in touch with one another as much as possible, which is always difficult when you're on the road and away from home.
You touched on here, like when we were talking about earlier as well, mindfulness for motoring. What's your thoughts around? And we did a whole webinar with some of the mindfulness gurus teams here, and just we can talk around the importance of the day. We did a breathing one earlier in the year as well. When you put the seatbelt on, I'd take 3 deep breaths and prepare myself for the trip, and just put my mind in the right space for that. What's your thoughts?
I think it's great. I think actually, well, when you talk about mindfulness, a lot of people go, whoa, 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 hippie stuff. And then you go, oh, being in the moment. But I think if you looked at mindfulness as being concentration, for example, so that you immediately take away going, oh, I don't want to do that because it sounds like hippie stuff and cheesecloth and goatee beards. If you take away that and just think about concentration, I occasionally do this. I don't do huge miles, but I do travel for my work. And I find sometimes you do mindfulness or concentration can be as simple as you really concentrating for the next 10 minutes on your driving. Driving, the more you do it, the more robotic you become in it. The better you become, but also the easier it becomes and the more you're prone to doing it. But by really, really focusing. So if you said to yourself, for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to make every year change as precise and as good as possible. I'm going to hit every curve just the right speed. I'm just going to maintain my speed without accelerating, without braking. I'm going to do everything smoothly. If you did that for 10 minutes and really, really focused on it, you find yourself calmer, more clear-headed, and not just because, well, you're driving well, but because while you're focused on that, you're not focused about, oh, I'm missing something at home. Oh, I'm supposed to have done this. Oh, will I got the money to pay for that this month or whatever. All those things that roll through your mind all the time, you're suddenly going, excuse me, but I put them to the side. I'm really focused on this. So by focusing on that, you're actually calming your mind and giving it a bit of a break by doing what you do really, really well and stop yourself. Because that's basically what mindfulness is, or however you want to describe it, is actually being really present, knowing what you're doing rather than having your mind telling you 1,000 other things and, oh, I've got to get here and I've got to be there. But to do that can be absolutely brilliant for your brain, and poor old brain never gets a rest.
Well, it is a big CPU, always looking to keep yourself busy, isn't it?
It is. And the thing is, if you don't control it, it's that big CPU that'll run off and think what it wants to think. If you don't bring it back in and corral it a bit like herding cats, come here, I want to stay here, it'll just run off.
And that's the thing is with, you mentioned earlier, when you're driving on the road, it's so easy to go to an automated. It's hard, like it becomes automated because you do it all the time. You've done it, might be the same sort of trip. And that's why it's so easy for the CPU just to run away.
Absolutely. And I like what you said about getting in, putting a seatbelt on or whatever. But when you do have breaks, actually making a bit of a formality of starting again. So almost to the point where, like, if you started your day, you checked your mirrors and all that, but just running through those things, maybe clearing out your cabin, rather than, oh, there's food wrappers out here, clearing it out, preparing it like somebody might prepare a desk and keep it clean. And then make a little ritual and formality of it, which is going to take you all of 2 minutes, so that you're really focused. And it sounds like Buddha driving a truck or something, but being focused, being there and going, I start again now. Because we can all do it. We can all stop, fill a car, back, off we go, and you just go straight back into it. But doing that just breaks that sort of habit of I'm just rolling and rolling and rolling, and stops, brings you back a little bit and helps you focus again.
And I guess in some ways, some people refer to, I get in the car and I'll add mobile phone to the mix as well. So I'll take the chance, like a call, all this sort of stuff, just to keep myself busy, keep myself moving. So I've got, instead of allowing my mind to run away.
Yeah. And it's, it's hard. I talk about this stuff and then, I better get my shit together and do this properly. And then you go, I'm not really, or you find you go, some days you go, I'll put some music on, and you really get into the music and it helps you stay focused and everything. Other days it just seems to float past your head, and you do go and you drive automatically. And I think it's being aware of trying to do that, because otherwise we just automatically do that day in, day out. It's a bit, I don't know if you've ever done it, but you go, oh, I've got to go to so-and-so, and you normally go this way to work or whatever, and then suddenly go, oh, no, I got a detour today, I got to do that. And then suddenly you find going 5 minutes later, I didn't do what I was supposed to have done, because I'm so automatically going to do that.
And I think that's really interesting to sort of point that sort of on setting yourself up with routines, prepping them. Then it's when the disruptions can come through. And that can put pressure on yourself. What's your thoughts? So, because the thing is that people are going along, things outside can then impact you.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things to that, I think. One is disruptions are frustrating. And it's particularly frustrating when you're working to deadlines or whatever, whether that be the salesperson going, I've got 8 things to do today, 8 sales visits, or somebody going, I've got to be in Brisbane at midnight tonight, or whatever that be. So there's obviously the frustration of that. And when our work becomes beyond our control, it gets really frustrating and stressful, I should say. But I think the other side of that too is that's where companies also have to toe the line. I live in Sydney, drive north quite a bit, but the 3-lane freeway out of Sydney has got, for about the last 18 months, roadworks on it for about 80k. And much of that is down to 80 kilometres. Sometimes it'll go down to 60. And I could imagine it's frustrating enough being in a car going, I'm just going away for a weekend. But if you're on a tight deadline to go, I've got to be delivering this at Coffs or wherever or whatever, having that must be hugely frustrating. But that's where I think companies have to go in and go, well, we have to allow that flexibility and allow people to know that they've got that flexibility so that they don't get madly frustrated and go, oh my God, I've got to do this, and possibly take risks later in the trip or whatever to compensate for that. People should work together to go, okay, you can't help it, we can't help it, client needs to know that, because we're going to make this a safe trip for everybody.
That's awesome. I think and on that, with regards to that prepping yourself, being in the moment, where does other sort of things in your lifestyle sort of fit? Where does diet fit? Where does sleep? How crucial all these sort of components?
Oh, well, the reason I'm wearing black today is to hide the fact that it's when you're at a desk all day, or when you're in a cab of a truck or a car or whatever, it's really difficult. When your career is built on getting from A to B regularly, it can be really hard to find time for that stuff. But we know that it's a huge part of physical health, mental health, is the ability to get out of that vehicle, even if it's just to kick the tires, get out, stretch, do that stuff. Because it's if you think about it in the long term, it's the stuff that allows you to be the long-term player, the marathon runner, as opposed to the person that just goes hard, and then burns out and goes, my whole body's falling apart. I'm not physically fit. The less physically fit you are, the worse you are mentally. So you really, this is easy for me to say to people, but you really owe it to yourself, and you owe it to your family or your friends or whatever, to find ways to try and keep yourself as fit as possible. I'm not talking about, you only have to look at me now, I'm not a gym junkie, but to walk, to park your car, further away from the entrance to the shopping centre or whatever, just get a bit of exercise. Hugely, hugely important. And I know it's also, it's a huge problem and a hard thing to deal with when you're on the road constantly and prone to going on grabs. The other thing too, I think, is the decline in diners. It's becoming harder and harder for people to find just a meal, sit down, be served by somebody, have a coffee, eat a proper meal, as opposed to now, Macca's, they've all died off. Now we pull into the big places and go, I'll grab some Macca's in a paper bag, I'll be back on the road. It'll save me 20 minutes. And here I go. And no shot at hope eat some of that stuff too, but it's still basically crap. You can't live on it.
Well, it's really, we'll just sing this out, the Healthy Heads Trucks and Shoes with the BP promotion. It's a fantastic one.
It's brilliant. I love this sort of stuff. BP, working with heads, what is it?
Healthy Heads Trucks.
Healthy Heads. BP say, well, we'll give you free healthy food, for example.
Off, yeah.
Yeah, and you're going, brilliant. We'll play our part in trying to help you stay healthy. And it's not sitting down for an hour and a half and eating celery. It's good, wholesome meal that you probably have at home. But as you do, when you think, oh, I'm in a hurry, I've got to keep going. What's instant? KFC, Macca's, all that. But I think it's brilliant, BP, to that. It's a way of saying you people are important. You're an important part of the economy. In fact, hugely important to the economy. Take care of yourselves.
Unfortunately, there's not enough of it. And that's the thing, with the shortage of labour and those sort of things, it's even more important to look after our workers.
Absolutely.
So having a bit of a thought around questions and beliefs of masculinity as well. Like we saw Kazi once again, here he is. We're beginning to see a bit of a changing of the stereotypes out there at the moment.
Yeah, I honestly, we think about masculinity, and I'm 65, so I come from a whole generation of where you man up, have a cup of concrete, all that sort of stuff. This might sound slightly strange, but I've got this analogy, and I think Kazi would show this. I think blokes, well, we get told that cricket and football, they're team sports. But I think if you think about it, cricket's just bordering as a team sport, because what happens, a batsman goes out to bat, and if he gets bowled first ball, he's got nobody else to blame. He's very individual. A bowler comes into bowl, he gets belted for 6. He can't turn around and look at somebody else and go, that's your fault. He was all by himself, got hit. Footy teams run on together. If somebody drops the ball, somebody else is there to pick it up. Somebody does make a mistake, they will go and pat them because they know fully well I could be the next bloke to do that. Whether they win or they lose, they walk off together and they are a unit. I think too many of us as men think I have to be the cricketer. I don't mean we wake up every day going, I should be a cricketer. I mean, I should be completely and utterly independent. Problems happen, man up, get on with it. I think you look at a bloke like Cuzzy, and we should call this the Cuzzy show. But if you look at a guy like Cuzzy, my mind is he's got a footballer's attitude towards manhood. We're all part of a team. And that team doesn't have to be just your workmates. That team could be your partner, your sister, whatever. But we're all part of a team. I'm helping out a teammate. And I think that's just a fantastic way because blokes love sport, but to go a bit more realistic, and we understand sometimes we'll drop the ball, we've got to pick it up ourselves. That's fair enough. But sometimes we'll drop the ball, and we will all drop the ball many, many times in our lives. But sometimes it's all right to have other people there to help you when it happens. And I just think men should be just that little bit kinder on themselves because that old-fashioned thinking of like I should be completely and utterly independent is just totally out of line with our life today. It's so far out of like you think back to when my father bought a house for what seemed like $2.50 on a good block of land, a lovely suburb, seemed to pay it off in 20 years, like easy done. We all went for holidays all the time. He worked for one company all his life. Things are so different to that now. You know, you need a mortgage the size of Uluru. Rates are going up. Petrol prices are going up. Life is so much harder. So to think with this old Anzac spirit of that's what I should be, just sets you up for a big fall every time.
I know we're just talking a lot about males as well. Well, women, because I think how does it play around them? Because they see it all. They're a crucial component of the workforce as well. We saw cars, but I think some of the other ones we have coming out, some amazing insights from some of these female truck drivers and other sort of groups in there. I think that's a big value add for what's sort of going on in the workforce at the moment. Are they like, how do we make sure they're always engaged and checking in on them?
I think it's the same way as we do with men. We know, I think, especially coming from a male perspective, the cliche is the women are always fine because they find it so easy to talk. You know, it's so easy to just sit down and have a cup of coffee. But you can't forget that, like even to talk about suicide, 3/4 of people that take their lives in the country might be men, but that's still 25% being women. So it's so wrong as blokes to go, well, women are fine. They've got this inbuilt survival instinct that they all go and have a chat together. Everything's fine. Just move on with it. And the other thing I think we've got to keep in mind too, whether it's a male or a female, but when things aren't going well for you, they always have knock-on effects, whether it's for people at home or whatever. I know with my mental illness, I think my wife actually suffered more than I did. And I always say it was like my wife almost had, like we've got 2 daughters, it was almost like she had a 3rd child for most of her life. So I think that's the other thing you've got to keep in mind too. It's keeping a perspective about those around you to make sure they're doing all right, even when you're at times not doing well yourself. And it's very natural to become self-absorbed, but to try and keep that perspective to go, you're all right, everything all right, you know, sort of, because otherwise it becomes very difficult for other people in your life.
I'd love to hear, like, if others have some questions or things they'd love to share, I'd love you to throw them out as well. I know hearing a lot from us, and we'd love to be guided by some of the people online if they're willing to take the thoughts to throw them out there. And I know talking with one of our partners, a large transport company, one of the comments that was made to us is quite often around Valentine's Day, they'll see their drivers are naturally more often distracted and their workers are more distracted because they're all away from home and they're feeling those moments of isolation coming through even more.
Yeah. So
do we have to be more careful around certain times of the year?
yeah, I think so. For sure. For anybody, that fear of missing out thing must be really hard for people who are away from their homes quite a bit. But I think there are, like even around the Christmas period is a very tough time for people. If people are out working over public holidays, when you go, well, there's other people at home with family and friends and stuff like that. I think you've got to be ultra aware of what's going on, not just with yourself, but with others, because there are key times. Christmas is a huge time for suicide. It's for many people, it's the best time of the year. It's family and friends and all of that, but then there are those others who don't have that or have gone through well, the other thing is too, you might have gone through a really rough time during the year. Perhaps you've had a divorce or a split with a partner or lost a parent or whatever. So there's a lot of times, unfortunately, because life's just not constant, that can be ups and downs for people. But public holidays, times when you're missing kids' plays or whatever at home, and there's other dads being there or mums there or whatever. All those things play a really big toll and make you feel like I shouldn't be doing this, but you're doing it for those people. That's the whole point. So you shouldn't be whipping yourself. It's hard not to feel guilty, but you shouldn't be whipping yourself because they're the people you're actually doing what you're doing it for.
So is there things organisations can do more during those sort of periods as well? And the lead up, what can they do to support their workers when they're out on the road?
It's a very good question. Thanks. Well, I guess one of the biggest things is to be aware of it. And also, I think to forearm, to arm workers, to make them aware of these things, of what and what they might encounter, and to allow avenues, if possible, to give them default things where they can go, look, if you're dealing with problems, I mean, this should be a year-round thing, but you're dealing with problems, give us a ring, or we can put you in touch with this particular group, or even for many large trucking companies, like their employee assistance programs. But to have people, have drivers really aware of what's available to them and where they can get help. It's all very well to teach people to get help. You raise your hand, you lead. But sometimes when people are down or it's tough times, it's very hard to even know where to start. I think there's a big job to be done going, you have problems, of course you can talk to us, but here's that we would encourage you. And to be really across it. Because even with an employee assistance program for larger companies, many of the HR people go, oh, I didn't really know quite that they offered all of that as well. So I think anything like that, where people go, actually, I've got backup, rather than just saying, here's a number for Lifeline, here's a number for this, here's a number for that, but going, I got really good backup around here. I need only get on a call, talk to a manager, or talk to this or talk to that for help. It makes a huge difference to people, because they're not always going to be in a position to go, now where do I start? I feel down. I'm really down at the moment. I got to get to Newcastle tonight. I'm feeling really down. The thought of even knowing where to start to get help can be hugely difficult for people.
And you mentioned a number of numbers there. What happens if people call it and it's engaged or it's not answered? How is it, with the worker side, but then with the organisation side, you put that forward as you make it. What happens if it doesn't work?
Well, I think Lifeline, for example, in a situation at the moment, they can't handle all the calls because there's such a growth in calls. And no matter how much more funding they get, and most of their funding comes through charity and fundraising, they're still finding time. That's one thing. But I think if it's something that you're actually funding as a company, or an EAP or whatever, there should be, and there is, I know, with like a lot of major EAPs, where you ring in, you get answered, because it's not like I'm ringing straight into the psychologist. I'm ringing into somebody, and if you don't, you should be going straight back to the HR and going, "There's something wrong with this relationship. We're paying good money to have that." I think if you're ringing Lifeline and you don't get an answer, it's really hard, but it's a game of persistence. And you go, I'm going to give it, like you would with other numbers, you go, I'm going to give it 15 minutes and I'm ringing back, because you will get on. But it's just in those situations, people get hugely frustrated. They go, I reached out, I needed help, and there was nothing available. And that's a very difficult thing at any time, but especially for men, persistence in terms of I'm seeing a doctor or something like that, persisting in doing this, because we all go, oh, my left arm's nearly falling off, it'll be all right, I'll see a doctor next week. It's the same for mental health issues. So it's like the ability to persist and go, if I'm talking to somebody or seeing somebody and they say, come back and see me again or ring me in again, doing that can be difficult for blokes, but we really need to push ourselves to do that.
So the organisation should circle back and just check as well.
I think so. Just as the same. Once again, old Cuzzy's going to check back in on that bloke. They're going to have a coffee, but I can guarantee that guy will, in a week's time, ring his mate and go, hey, are you feeling any better? You done this or you done that? We just, exactly, that circle, and especially if companies doing that, I think there's a duty, responsibility that they do that.
And everyone, Cuzzy's part of our Heavy Good Toolbox talk, Are You Okay to Drive? And it's part of the video that's been developed to support that as well. So you can freely use it. And I think the powerful thing about that is you can use him as an icebreaker, I would say. So if you're going up, you're going to talk to miners or truck drivers, or even can be salespeople, this sort of stuff, you put him up there, or you share those sort of examples. That's a great icebreaker, wouldn't you think?
Oh, absolutely. About a month ago, I was talking to miners, and during the lunch break, one of the older guys came up to me and said, do you mind if I say a few words after? You come right in. So we went into the next session, and this guy gets up, and I didn't even know what he's going to talk about. For 10 minutes, he talked how he'd been suicidal, what he'd been through, what he'd done. And I tell you what, like, I was almost envious, because the guys were really good with me, paying attention. But when this guy started talking, they just went, here's one of us talking openly about problems that they've experienced. And I said to him after, I said, your 10 minutes would have been far more valuable to them than my hour and a half. And it would have been. I really mean that. I wasn't joking, because to see somebody in a similar role to yourself going, this is what I do, it's brilliant. It's the best, most powerful sort of education you can get.
And once again, going back to drive, like when you're in your car on your own, the mind's running away. You might be a bit, and the thing is, if you're more fatigued, your mind actually gets worse at clickbaiting.
Yes, yes, yeah.
So fatigue and jet lag, those are things. The negative clickbait's even worse than the mind.
Yes,
so,
yeah.
So just closing this sort of out as we sort of come up towards the end, what would be some of the key things you'd sort of put out to people? So what would you recommend from your experiences and as the mental health first aid trainer and Black Dog speaker and wisdom?
I'd say one of the thanks. I'd say one of the big things is awareness of how you're feeling. We think about our physical health because it reminds us, like I often liken it. If you're getting the flu has a way of knocking on your door. A couple of days before you, I'm a bit achy, geez, I'm tired. And then bang, it hits you and you go, oh my God, I feel so sick, I'm so weak. But it's announced it. Whereas mental health issues don't do that. They sneak up on you like a lion in a long grass, and they just sort of very slowly. I think if we paid as much attention to our feelings and I mean this by just a check-in every couple of days, as we did to the weather. So we check the weather every day. Go, it's going to be hot tomorrow. Oh, I'll be in a shirt sleeves. Well, it's going to be raining tomorrow. I better start early, you know, because it's going to take a bit longer on the road or whatever. We do that as a natural sort of thing. If we just did that with our feelings every now and then, and I don't mean this to be all soft and cuddly, but going, how am I actually feeling today? Am I up? I'm down? Or even if I just gave myself a number out of 10, where do I sit on that? I go, oh, I'm 7, I'm all right. Or I'm 8, I'm feeling really good. But if I'm 5 or 4, you know, I keep an eye on that. Because if I go 2 days running or 3 days running and go, I'm still sitting down at 4, I'm really not good. Because sometimes we have mood swings, we feel down and then we pop back up. But other times, but to watch yourself like that, and if you're going, you know what, I'm feeling pretty crap, and that's easy, but that's the time you should be reaching out. You should be prepared to go, as soon as I've got chance, I'm seeing a doctor. If I work for a company with an EAP, maybe I'm going to speak to them and I don't know, talk to a psychologist. Even if it's reaching out to a mate, even if it's reaching out and go, you know what, I'm not feeling great at the moment, you know, blah, 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 and just having a chat. But we don't do that. We take our mental health just for granted until it completely and utterly unwinds. And then you go, I can barely function. Sorry, that's to be. If we just focused a little more, and I'm talking, that's 30 seconds a day. That's 30 seconds. It's not sitting there for an hour going, let me analyze, was there something in my childhood, was this? That's just going, how am I feeling? Today, I feel 8, 9. You know, I feel really good. Tomorrow, who knows? But thinking about it rather than just accepting it and going, I'm down, I feel like shit, you know, and just accepting that the way it is not the right way to go about it.
I think the other part is you draw that in, and then when you're on the road driving your emotions, and look, I've done some with Amanda Stevens and Sean, there's amazing people I've managed to meet through here at New York, and how all these emotions feed into how you drive. So how you drive is how you live, which is how you work, and these things are all integrated in there, because there's nothing like when you're driving a vehicle, you can feed your emotions through the vehicle and how you actually have it.
Absolutely. We all do, don't we? If we're frustrated or angry, we drive more aggressively. If we're like feeling calm or everything, we can, you know, this sounds really wanky, but you know, like when they talk about becoming one with the vehicle, you know, they say racing drivers talk about that. Going, I didn't even feel, I just felt like we're all one thing, because I was so in the zone with it and I was just doing everything perfectly. And yet other times I go, yeah, I really had to work it. I really, you know, like I had to struggle with everything that I did because it just didn't seem to be. And I think in lots of things we do in life, that's true. Sometimes you go, that was just so damn easy. And other times you go, that was so damn hard. But trying to maintain a good sense of calm and I feel on top of things, I think gives you that ability to be better. I mean, we're not going to do it every day. We're human beings. We're going to have bad times, good times. You have a fight with your partner, you're out on the road, you're going to sit and think about it all bloody day. But there's other times when we can force ourselves to go, I don't have to be like this. I can actually kickstart myself and I can be more objective with how I'm thinking and what I'm doing. And the more we can do that, the better we do it, the more we enjoy it. And that's a pretty damn good thing to do for work.
Awesome. I think it's a great way to close out. So thank you very much for your time today, David.
Not at all,
thank you
mate.
everyone who was listening in today. And yeah, have a great week and check in with each other as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.